Marc Bernal, an 18-year-old academy graduate, returned from one of the worst knee injuries in professional sports and turned the €80 million world-class midfielder, Frenkie de Jong, into a bench option. That sentence sounds like fiction, but Barcelona's 2025/2026 season turned it into a spreadsheet. Over a 14-match stretch without Frenkie de Jong, Barcelona won 13 times and drew once, losing 0, which works out to a 92.8% win rate without the highest paid player on the entire roster. The teenager filling that midfield spot had spent the previous 382 days relearning how to walk after a ruptured ACL and torn meniscus. Marc Bernal didn't just keep the seat warm, he seized the position so completely that getting it back may no longer be possible. None of this makes sense unless you understand what Hansi Flick did to Barcelona's identity when he took charge. For 2 decades, the midfield ran on patience and geometry, with tiny technicians like Xavi and Iniesta passing the ball hundreds of times before it reached the final third. Flick scrapped all of that. What he installed looks closer to a controlled demolition than traditional possession football. A high-pressing 4-2-4 structure where the front four hunt the ball like animals and the defensive line shoves dangerously high, sometimes sitting right on the halfway line. And that's when the requirements for the number 6 position changed completely. The old system needed a chess player, someone cerebral and calm, content to recycle the ball with 5-yard passes all night long. Flick's system demands a physical anchor who can win headers against Premier League strikers, snuff out counterattacks before they develop, and still move the ball forward at speed without wasting touches. Picture a Category 5 hurricane, with debris flying in every direction and nothing staying still for more than a second. Yamal, Rafinha, and Lewandowski are that debris, sprinting and pressing and creating chaos all over the pitch. Right in the center of that storm, you need something that never moves, a metronome ticking at the exact same tempo regardless of what's happening around it. Marc Bernal is that metronome. Without him, the whole system flies apart. Which brings us to the Frenkie de Jong problem. De Jong plays like a Ferrari, built for acceleration, for picking the ball up deep and gliding through the center of the pitch with those long, beautiful dribbles. Watching him carry the ball is genuinely spectacular. But Flick isn't designing a racetrack, he's constructing a skyscraper, and you cannot pour the foundation of a 100-story building on top of a sports car. Bernal, standing 1.93 meters tall with 87 kilograms of post-rehab muscle packed onto his frame, acts as reinforced concrete. He holds his position so the attackers can push forward without the whole structure caving in behind them. De Jong's instinct is to carry, to take multiple touches and beat the press himself, and every time he does that, a small vacuum opens in the space he just left. In Flick's system, a vacuum lasting half a second is all it takes for the entire defensive shape to collapse. Here's where most people get Marc Bernal completely wrong. Every pundit on the continent has labeled him the Busquets regen, a pure defensive pivot whose only job is to sit deep, break up play, and move the ball sideways. If you've only watched the first team, that label feels reasonable, but the youth data tells a wildly different story. Across his entire time at Masia, Bernal put up 280 goals in 286 matches. At under 8 level alone, that number sat at 58 goals in 286 matches, which works out to more than 2 goals per game as a child. Even after he moved to full-size pitches and dropped deeper into the midfield, the scoring never really stopped, with 39 goals in 35 Benjamin A matches and 12 in 28 Cadete A games. Compare that to Sergio Busquets, who scored 18 goals across his entire 722-game Barcelona career. Bernal had 280 before he ever touched a first-team pitch. The instinct to score didn't vanish when he became a holding midfielder. It just went quiet. And in March of 2026, during 2 of the biggest matches of the season, that instinct came roaring back in a way nobody outside of La Masia saw coming. Before any of those goals arrived, though, there were 382 days of silence, empty gyms, and hospital ceilings. On August 27th of 2024, Marc Bernal was 17 years old and had just started his first 3 La Liga matches under Flick, the kind of breakout moment young players dream about their entire lives. Deep into stoppage time against Rayo Vallecano at the Vallecas Stadium, his knee buckled. The diagnosis came back as a ruptured ACL with a torn external meniscus, which is career-threatening at any age but especially terrifying for a teenager whose body hasn't finished growing. described hitting rock bottom that first month, admitting he could barely get out of bed and wanted to sleep all day just to shut everything out. Anyone who's watched a young athlete grind through a long-term rehab knows the feeling of those treatment rooms, the repetitive exercises, the total disconnection from the squad that used to define your daily life. That changed when Flick showed up at the hospital in person. Not a text message, not a staff member carrying flowers, but the manager of FC Barcelona sitting at the bedside of a 17-year-old with a destroyed knee. Flick brought a self-help book about overcoming adversity, and inside the front cover he'd written a handwritten note telling Bernal not to rush, not to worry about timelines, and that he was destined to be one of the great players of the future. Those words became an anchor that held through everything that followed. When other clubs, including Girona, came calling during the winter transfer window with promises of immediate playing time, Bernal didn't even consider leaving. Flick believed in him when his knee was in pieces, and that kind of loyalty sticks. 382 days after the injury, Marc Bernal walked back onto a football pitch and immediately posted a 93.3% passing accuracy across the Liga and Champions League competition with a 100% dribble success rate in Europe. What came back from that rehab wasn't the same player who went down at Vallecas. Bernal had used those months in the gym to pack on serious muscle mass, returning visibly bulkier and physically dominant in a way he hadn't been before the injury. And then came the two matches that closed the argument for good. First up was the Copa del Rey semi-final second leg against Atletico Madrid, with Barcelona staring at a 4-0 aggregate deficit against Diego Simeone's defense, which was parked as deep as it gets. The player who stepped up and punished that low block wasn't Lewandowski or Yamal, it was the holding midfielder. Bernal registered 62 touches, fired 5 shots with 4 landing on target, and buried a brace that included a finish right in front of 45,399 fans after Yamal cut the ball back to him. A defensive midfielder putting up those numbers against a Simeone side doesn't just raise eyebrows, it rewrites expectations for the position entirely. What nobody expected was what came next. On March 17th of 2026, Newcastle United visited the Spotify Camp Nou for the Champions League round of 16 second leg. After a 1-1 draw at St. James Park in the first leg, the return fixture started as a back-and-forth war, with Anthony Elanga equalising twice for Newcastle and the score sitting at a fragile 3-2 at halftime. Flick walked into the dressing room and gave one specific instruction. His own words from the post-match press conference were, "We played too directly in the first half. I told them we had to press them, then control the ball." 3 words in that sentence, control the ball, placed the entire burden of the Champions League knockout tie on the broad shoulders of his 18-year-old pivot. The second half looked like a different sport. Bernal dictated the tempo with total composure, and Barcelona scored 4 unanswered goals to finish the match 7-2 and the aggregate 8-3. Bernal had already scored earlier in the game, finishing from close range after a headed knockdown from a free kick. Eddie Howe stood on the sideline afterward and told the press that his team psychologically never recovered. An 18-year-old, barely a year removed from ACL surgery, had just dismantled a Premier League side on the biggest stage in European club football. While Bernal was doing all of that, Frenkie de Jong's body kept failing him at the worst possible time. During a morning training session in that same window, de Jong tore the distal biceps femoris in his right leg, a serious hamstring injury that sidelined him for 5 to 6 weeks. Reports circulated that the usually composed Dutchman was spotted crying in his car as he drove away from the training ground after receiving the diagnosis. That single image carries the full weight of the story. The highest paid player at Barcelona, sitting alone in his car with tears running down his face, while 80,000 people inside the stadium were singing the name of the teenager who took his spot. None of this means de Jong deserves the villain treatment. This is a player who fought against intense internal pressure to sell him in 2022 and 2023, who publicly declared, "When you have a contract, if you decide you want to stay, you stay. That's why I wasn't afraid." De Jong genuinely loves Barcelona and chose loyalty when walking away would have been easier and far more profitable. But football doesn't care about loyalty when the scoreboard tells a different story, and the scoreboard reads 13 wins in 14 matches without him. Zoom out from the pitch now and look at the boardroom, because that's where final chapter of this conflict plays out. De Jong's contract expires on June 30th of 2026, and sporting director Deco has tried to negotiate an extension, but only under the condition that De Jong accepts a massive pay cut to stay within La Liga's financial fair play limits. Saudi Pro League clubs have been assembling packages that would triple his current salary, and Liverpool, now managed by his Dutch compatriot Arne Slot, have identified him as a primary target in the range of 35 to 40 million euros. On the opposite side of the balance sheet, Barcelona locked Bernal into a new long-term deal and attached a release clause of 500 million euros, $500 million for 18-year-old. That number alone tells you everything about who the club views as its future. The financial math behind this decision is blunt. Barcelona is still absorbing the cost of rebuilding the Spotify company, a multi-billion-euro construction project that suffered severe delays and bled the club dry of matchday revenue for over a year. Every salary line gets scrutinized by auditors and league officials in that environment, and justifying the highest wages on the squad for a player who is both tactically redundant and physically unreliable becomes nearly impossible when the academy kid replacing him costs zero in transfer fees and helped the team win at a 93% clip. So who gets the spot in Barcelona's midfield going forward? The honest answer is that this decision already got made, not by a press conference or a leaked transfer rumor, but by 14 matches, 13 victories, and one teenager who refused to let a torn knee end his story before it started. Marc Bernal didn't just cover for Frenkie de Jong during an absence. He redefined what the position looks like at Barcelona, turning the defensive midfield role from a quiet chess piece into a 1.93-meter wrecking ball that also happens to pass at 93% and score braces in Champions League knockout rounds. De Jong remains a generational talent, and that hasn't changed. The system around him has. Flick's Barcelona doesn't need a Ferrari sitting in the middle of the pitch, it needs concrete. And the kid from Berga, the one who used to ride in the front seat of a taxi every day just to reach training, whose childhood friends Yamal and Kubarsi now start alongside him in front of 80,000 people, has become the most immovable foundation this club has built since Busquets retired. Except Bernal scores more. A lot more. The metronome has claimed its place in the center of the hurricane and is not giving it back.